This message is sponsored by Greenlight. With school out, summer is the perfect time to teach our kids real-world money skills they'll use forever. Greenlight is a debit card and the #1 family finance and safety app used by millions of families, helping kids learn how to save, invest, and spend wisely. Parents can send their kids money and track their spending and saving, while kids build money confidence and skills in fun ways. Start your risk-free Greenlight trial today at greenlight.com/Spotify. That's greenlight.com/Spotify.
This episode brought to you by MGM Plus. From executive producer Stephen King and an executive producer of Frog comes The Institute, a chilling new original series from MGM Plus. Kidnapped and trapped in a sinister facility, gifted teen Luke Ellis must join other children to fight for their survival. Starring Emmy Award winner Mary Louise Parker, Ben Barnes, and introducing Joe Freeman. The Institute. Watch now on MGM Plus. New episodes streaming Sundays.
Another switchback. Wait, this isn't the top? Where's the summit? Why am I doing this?
At REI Co-op, we believe there are places within ourselves
Almost there. You got this.
that we find only outside.
Wow. This is worth it.
We have the gear, inspiration, and advice to help you get there. REI Co-op. Visit rei.com.
It's back to school season, and Clorox is donating 2 million disinfecting wipes to classrooms across America. Because back to school means things can get a little bit messy. Just ask kindergarten teacher Miss Gibson.
Give me just one Clorox wipe and I'm ready for glitter glue, exploded lunchbox yogurt, peanut butter handprints, runny noses, picking noses, rubbing noses.
Touching noses.
Thank you, Edward. Ooh, nap mats and lockers and tissue boxes. And
Clorox
scissors.
disinfecting wipes. Teacher's #1 wipe. Clean feels good. Based on unit sales data.
16 years from today, Greg Gerstner will finally land the perfect cannonball. Epic splash. Unsuspecting friends. A work of art only possible because Greg is already meeting all these same people at AARP volunteer and community events that keep him active and involved and help make sure his happiness lives as long as he does. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Learn more at aarp.org/local.
Hello, and welcome to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. We are so excited to bring you this show.
Our podcast is all about unraveling all of your favorite mysteries from the Assassin's Creed games. Each episode, we'll be talking about a different topic in the Assassin's Creed universe. From Pieces of Eden, solar flares, and the Isu, to the Hidden Ones, the Order of Ancients, and of course, the Animus. We will seek to uncover it all.
So join us, and maybe even take a leap of faith.
Hello and welcome to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. My name is Shelby. You also know me as She-Cup, and we are back with another episode. But first, I'm here with my co-host.
Hey, I'm Austin or Teacup.
That's right, you are, and we're back with another Assassin or Templar episode. So, my question is, Austin, today, we're going to America.
Yes. I feel like we've been in Europe for the past couple of weeks. Well, I guess Oppenheimer and Tesla both have big places in America.
They do, but I do feel like they exist in a like liminal bridge between America and Europe at the same time. Tesla more so than Oppenheimer, but I feel like the only other American we've done is Harriet Tubman.
George Washington.
George Washington, that's right. He was like the first one we did, though. So forgive me, it's been a while. But today we're back with another U.S. president.
Yes. So this is the 16th U.S. president, which is a very important U.S. president. This was the president during the Civil War. None other than Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was obviously president during the Civil War. He signs what's called the Emancipation Proclamation and got the 13th Amendment to the Constitution passed, which ended slavery in the U.S.
It technically only ended slavery in the United States for people who are not prisoners.
Yes,
Technically,
that is
slavery
correct.
is still legal for those of you who are in jail.
Yes.
Sorry.
It's why you can do labor in the jails and for nothing. But that's a whole nother conversation. So Abraham Lincoln has a very impressive resume for a president. He is often listed as one of the best presidents that we've ever had. So I don't want to go too much into his historical overview because we will be there for a long time, and there's a lot to go over. Again, you can look that up if you are more interested in that. But here are a couple of highlights that I want to give before I kind of get more into his belief system and characters. So Lincoln has always been an opposer of the expansion of slavery. Now, for those of you who are not U.S. and you don't know quite the history of our Civil War, a lot of what is happening by the time the Civil War gets into swing is the biggest debate is, will new states who become a part of the United States be slave states or not? And a lot of people like in Lincoln's party and Lincoln's position are opposed to the expansion of slavery. It's not necessarily that they want to go into these states where slavery is already established and take it away. They want to stop it from expanding. And that's the big thing. And it's very much in the same thing of like, let's stop it from expanding and then we can tackle it in the places it's already is.
Yeah. And I think that is like a big difference between like true full abolitionists and people who want to end slavery. Like, there's a difference there.
Yes. Like, comparing Lincoln to someone like Harriet Tubman or Frederick Douglass. He is opposed to the expansion of slavery. When he runs for president, he is also vehemently opposed to the Mexican-American War, which was started by James K. Polk, who was from Tennessee. Woohoo! And so, whatever. But he was opposed to that. He called the war, like James K. Polk, lust for glory. So Lincoln when he runs for president, he runs and markets himself as a moderate Republican. And I just want to read a speech that he's had. This is a man who is often quoted and lorded over as the president who ended slavery. And this is what he said when he was getting elected. Apprehension seems to exist among the people of the southern states that by the ascension of a Republican administration, their property, their peace, their personal security are to be endangered. There never been any reasonable cause for such apprehension. Indeed, the most ample evidence to the contrary has all the while existed and been open to their inspection. It is found nearly on all published speeches of him who now addresses you. I do but quote from one of those speeches when I declare that I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so and have no inclination to do so.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that that's out of character for Lincoln. I know that there are people who do think that it's out of character for him. But for me, I personally have never looked at Lincoln as this like perfect president who ran and became a politician so that he could free the slaves. I think that the question of slavery became such a divisive issue in 1860s America that something was going to have to be done no matter what. Mm-hmm. And I think that Lincoln knew that. Not that Lincoln wanted to abolish slavery because he believed in the rights of black people.
Right. And I think a lot of times we need to take ownership of the fact that we have erased the works of true abolitionists by giving them to Lincoln with the passing of the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment.
True. And I mean, I also think we have to be honest with ourselves as just our history, but the Emancipation Proclamation was just that, a proclamation. Mm-hmm. It didn't really free any slaves. Maybe slaves, people who were technically still enslaved, who lived in the North, who had escaped, would no longer be under any threat of law or anything like that. But slaves in the South, they had no idea the Emancipation Proclamation was even proclaimed.
Right. And when the you can, if I'm wrong on this, I might be wrong because I haven't fact checked this, but I believe when the Emancipation Proclamation is proclaimed, the Fugitive Slave Act is still in law.
I don't know the dates on that, so don't quote me.
So yeah, but if that's the case, then freed slaves in the North can be taken back by their owners. Now, this is an interesting fact that I think, given the American political climate right now, is just really interesting. Lincoln won the presidency without a single electoral vote from the southern states. It's different America.
I know. I knew that fact.
Yeah.
But it is interesting given that we're in an election season right now, and I don't think this will happen again.
No.
But I was actually looking at Jimmy Carter's presidential election map. And it's fascinating. Like Republican California and Republican Illinois, Republican Massachusetts and New Jersey, just like things that are unthinkable today. It's crazy. And like Jimmy Carter's map is like 100% blue South. And it's just like, this is totally different from our current electoral map. And it's fascinating to me how the parties have changed and how electoral politics has changed over the years from Lincoln to the 60s to now, 60s and 70s to now.
But it also, like, it sometimes thinks that rarely has a president ascended to office with having an entire region. And I don't want to say this because of the way the Electoral College works. There were people in the South who voted for Lincoln.
Absolutely. Their
states just didn't go that way. So their electoral votes didn't go to Lincoln.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, been true in every single election ever. No entity of anything is a monolith.
Right. I mean, even the state of Tennessee didn't fully succeed.
Yeah, but like even turning it back to Assassin's Creed, like not every Templar agrees with the actions of the Grand Master. You know?
Exactly. I mean, look at Haytham Kenway.
Exactly.
Even though he is a Grand Master.
Well, not all of his underlings agreed with him.
Exactly.
Charles Lee.
Don't get me all riled up.
Okay.
That's Revolutionary War. So Lincoln, as a belief system, and this is what I kind of want to leave us with before our mid-break, he's an institutional man. And what I mean by that is he valued the Union and the institution of our government more than anything. When he proclaims the Emancipation, because he basically gets a lot of criticism for this from his supporters who are like, this is not the way for peace. This is not the way to get this war to end and stop this suffering. He says, my paramount object is in this struggle is to save the Union. It is not either to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing all slaves, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. This man is not about ending slavery.
Yeah, I mean, I very much struggle with that quote because I am the exact opposite of an institutionalist. So it's hard for me to like listen to that because it's so different from my own personal belief system. I think that every president, though, has to feel this way. You have to feel that way about the country in order to be an effective and good ruler.
Yes, I do agree with that. And I think I'm painting Lincoln in a little bit of a more negative light. And so I want to be fair to that. In his personal journals, in a lot of his letters that he writes, he does talk about slavery as something that is like deplorable and that's something that needs to end. I am just focused mainly on his policy, and his decision making is not really about ending slavery, though he does preside over its official end, except for prisoners.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think that that's something that's really hard for presidents, because as a president, you can't just enact all of your own personal thoughts and opinions. You just can't. That's not how electoral politics, that's not how bipartisanship, that's not how our system works. You can't accomplish everything you want to politically, much less everything you personally believe. So I can't imagine that it would be very difficult for somebody who has a personal disagreement with something as severe as slavery and have to in your opinion, prioritize the institution over. I'm not sure I could make that choice, but that's probably why I'm not the president.
Right. And I do want to say this, like, because I don't want people to take away this that I am saying Lincoln is a bad person, because I'm not necessarily don't think that he is necessarily like a bad person with bad motivations. I think he's a product of his time, of where he was. And I think that deep at his core, he cares about the people of the United States of America, and he is trying to do what he thinks will save the most people. I just don't think that he views black people as people.
I mean, and to date, the Civil War is still the war that killed the highest number of Americans.
Yes.
But also, I feel like, to your point that you don't think Lincoln's a bad person, my opinion personally, this may piss some listeners off, but I don't really care. I kind of think you have to be at least a little bit of a bad person to be a president.
Right. You can't have a strict morality. And it comes down to a sense of you have, as a president, you have to decide what is the best course for the most people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really hard.
There are hard decisions involved in politics. And absolutely.
And complicated. And I want to stress that I understand that there are complicated. I'm not a politician. I do not understand all the ins and outs, but I know that there are deeply complicated decisions that have to be made in politics.
Yeah, for sure. But unless you have other things to add, I think now will be a good time for our mid-break.
No, I think I'm good. Let's get to it.
Ma cos'è? Shoot! Shoot the flying demon!
Quite a carriage you got there. Where did you buy it, if you don't mind me asking?
Ask all you want, Freddy. You'll never get an answer.
Damn it all. Was it my eyebrows?
Yes, and your face, voice, and body.
What have you done? We used them. They were not ready for firing. You could have gotten us all killed. Let me see. His breath is more fatal than our cannons. Only when you two fools are shooting them. There, try it.
Hello and welcome to the middle of the show. This is where we talk about all the things that have to do with the lore cast and not the lore of Assassin's Creed. So the first thing that we do every week is thank all of our amazing patrons. Thank you all so much for your support over the months. We greatly appreciate it. And if you want to become a patron and come on our patron chat that's coming up in just a few weeks, you should join the Patreon. You can find it at patreon.com/ACLorecast, or you can just click the link in our episode description. And if you can't leave us a rating, or if you can't join us on Patreon, you can leave us a rating or a review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you can. We'll get to it somehow, and we'll read it out on a future episode of this show. And I do not believe we have one to read today. So if you leave us one within the next week, we'll read it out on the next episode. And then the last thing I have to tell you is that you should come join our Discord server. We've got a great community of people hanging out and talking all about different video games. So if that's something you're interested in, come and hang out with us. But I think that's all we've got for the middle of the show. So let's get back into it.
Leading a business today means constantly adapting. On the Executive Insights podcast, brought to you by AWS, global leaders share how they're making tough calls, testing bold ideas, and putting innovation into practice, generative AI included. If you're looking for real stories behind what's working, this is it. Subscribe to the Executive Insights podcast today, available now on all major podcast platforms.
Malaka! But that madman, the self-proclaimed Bishop of the Ruins, is our biggest critic. He calls our playing the devil's bagpipes.
I will sleep with anyone as long as they agree to be executed in the morning.
Like Xanthivis.
He was well satisfied with his bargain. Who is this toothsome fellow?
My queen, this is,
Well?
It is a generous offer, but I have already pledged my life to this woman.
Aya, you have chosen well.
All right, so with this next part, before we get into his Assassin's Creed involvement, I just want to talk about Lincoln's kind of belief system. And I want to preface this by saying that this is very focused in a Judeo-Christian belief system because that's Lincoln's belief system. So I'm going to be talking in a lot of that. So Lincoln, based on his writings and based on a lot of what he says in his speeches that we have, believes in a very deterministic God. And so what that means is that Lincoln believes in a God who is in control of everything and has determined how everything is going to go. So every little decision, from what you're going to eat for dinner to is this country going to war, is determined by God and is governed by God's will. Very little room for individual human choice in that view of God. So Lincoln subscribes to what's called the doctrine of necessity, which I want to pause at this, really important, because I think once I say this, people are going to know where I think Lincoln falls. A belief that the human mind was controlled by a higher power. And then with his death of his son Edward in 1850, that's one thing I didn't cover. The Lincoln family have a lot of children tragedies. It's very sad, and his wife Mary basically goes insane because of it.
It's also why people have all those conspiracy theories about JFK and Lincoln, because they have so many of those kind of like familial similar instances.
Right. But like it is Lincoln's family life, and I cannot stress, is very, very sad. They lose a lot of their children to a lot of things, and it is just sad. So after his son Edward dies in 1850, he more frequently expressed a dependence on God. Lincoln never officially joined a church. He was not on the membership rolls of any church, though he did attend a Presbyterian church with his wife.
I mean, I will say, I do think that somebody who believes in a more Calvinistic, deterministic expression of faith makes sense that they would be attending a Presbyterian church.
Yes, but I do want to note that he is one of the few presidents on record that did not have a membership at a church, which I found interesting.
Especially for the 1800s.
Lincoln did believe in an all-powerful God. I mean, a God who determines everything, has to be all-powerful. By 1865, he was expressing that belief in major speeches. By the end of the war, he increasingly appealed to the Almighty for solace and to explain events. He wrote in a Kentucky newspaper on April 14th in 1864, "I claim not to have controlled events, but confess plainly that events have controlled me. Now, at the end of 3 years' struggle, the nation's condition is not what either party nor any man devised or expected. God alone can claim it. If God now wills the removal of a great wrong, and wills also that we of the North, as well as you of the South, shall pay fairly for our complicity in that wrong, impartial history will find it therein, the new cause to attest and revere the justice and goodness of God." So this is 1864. So this is near the very, very end of the war. The war is going to end in 1865. And so here we kind of see one of a few speeches that is him equating slavery with a morally unjust and wrong action, which he does not do in his kind of elections speeches.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think that we see this kind of shift in him over the years, at least of the speeches and things that you've gotten, like, and I wouldn't go so far as to say, oh, he's just saying that he's impartial and slavery doesn't really matter to him. The preservation of the Union is. Like, I don't think he's just saying that to get elected. I think that he probably truly did believe that. I think he was a senator before he was president. But I think that he was truly changed, because imagine as president, you have access to every power in the world. And if you as a person in the North have never seen true, real slavery, by the time you're president, you will know exactly what it's like. And so I feel like that those experiences probably changed him. his experiences meeting former slaves, meeting abolitionists, probably changed his mind on some of these things.
Mm-hmm. And it has to. Civil wars are almost always the most destructive and bloody in a country's history, mainly just because both sides, you're losing Americans.
Yeah.
Or people of your own country. And I think when we think about 1864, Atlanta is razed to the ground. Shiloh has happened. Gettysburg, Antietam, all of these huge and bloody conflicts of you're seeing just some of the most grotesque and deplorable situations on these soldiers would make anyone question, like, what is this goodness? Like, is this our own punishment? I mean, we see that kind of thing after the World Wars too that happen, just dealing with this atrocity. And I think that you wouldn't be human if you didn't walk away from one of those atrocities changed.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I also think, I mean, this goes more toward the everyday person, but like the soldiers fighting these wars mostly are not the people that benefit and profit from slavery.
Mm-hmm.
They are poor, regular, everyday people who have either escaped slavery, believe it's wrong, or don't own any slaves at all.
Right. Most of the slave owners are the people who are sitting like in Gone with the Wind and having house parties and drinking their wine and liquor, sitting there, be like, oh yeah, the war's happening. That's who are benefiting from slavery.
Exactly.
And I just want to say, like, before we move to AC involvement, and this is something that I want to do, although Lincoln does not ever really in like a public speech advocate for the abolition of slavery, Lincoln does accomplish the abolition of slavery and presides over it with the help of work of abolitionists who are in the government, like Frederick Douglass, and other people who are working to do that. The idea of like an executive order didn't really exist right now. I mean, the Emancipation Proclamation is probably the closest we get to that. So Lincoln believed that things should be accomplished by the way the law says. So things should be accomplished within Congress. So he and his allies really would have had to do the work to lay the groundwork for that. You see this in the movie Lincoln that came out back when we were in high school. Do you remember that?
I mean, I don't think I've ever seen it, but sure, I remember it.
They kind of go over this, and like there's some politically, like they blackmail some people into voting for the 13th Amendment. It's basically about the passing of the 13th Amendment. But like they lay this groundwork to make sure that this amendment can go through and get passed. Did believe in preserving the Union, and he was not like a very punishing president in the aftermath of the Civil War. And I think that needs to be said because these leaders of the Confederacy could have been executed under the law. All of them could have been executed under United States law for what they did, but Lincoln didn't believe in doing that. And he writes about Reconstruction in a lot of ways of not punishing the South, and he only vetoes 4 bills in his 2 terms. One of them is a punishing Reconstruction bill.
I mean, sometimes I feel like the South should have been punished more.
I mean, we say that as Southerners. I want to preface that. I don't disagree with you. But again, I think it makes sense for a president that's coming from, I want to preserve the peace of the Union. And I think it also makes sense because if they punish it, you just create martyrs out of these leaders.
That's fair. I guess I don't necessarily, I guess punish is not the right word. I think there definitely should have been stricter laws and rules and regulations about like how we look at the Confederacy going forward.
Yes. And I think there should have been stricter laws, even like it's the kind of lax Reconstruction policies that lead to the establishment of Jim Crow and segregation.
And I mean, I think it should be said that that's not Lincoln's fault. Lincoln gets assassinated like a month into his second term. And so again, a second time in this episode, let's blame a president from Tennessee. It's Andrew Johnson's fault because he basically rolls back all of the Reconstruction bills, all of the things to help Reconstruction. He basically says, no, we're not going to do it that. We're going to do it my way. And my way is to let the South do whatever they want. That's a little bit of glossing over some major history, but that's the reality. I think if we lived in a world where Lincoln didn't get assassinated, our country would have been rebuilt after the Civil War in a completely different way, and it would have changed the course of American history.
Exactly. And I think it's fair to say that, like, picking Andrew Johnson is one of the worst decisions that Abraham Lincoln made as president. There's a lot of them that he does. I mean, he rolls back a lot of constitutional rights on people, and that, like, paved the way for what would become the Patriot Act and the Espionage Act and things like that.
I was going to say, but would he have been elected if he had not kind of compromised and picked the Southerner to be on his ticket? But at the same time, he didn't win a single electoral state from the South, so maybe so.
Right. And it comes down to the fact that Andrew Johnson was almost set up to fail because the North didn't trust him because he was a Southerner, and the South didn't trust him because
he ran with Lincoln.
Yeah,
for sure.
Like, so he was just, and I want to say that, like, he is often listed as one of the worst presidents in the list. Oftentimes, the worst presidents, the bottom two, are Andrew Johnson and James Buchanan, who, guess who comes in between them? Abraham Lincoln, the 15th and 17th president.
Interesting. Well, let's get into the AC involvement, because I am really excited to talk about our thoughts because I have several.
Yes. So Lincoln in universe is a friend to the assassins. I want it said that in the Civil War, it is not as simple as assassins are the Union and Templars are the Confederacy. I will say there is not a single assassin that fights on the side of the Confederacy, which I think it would be lore breaking if they did.
Yes, I was going to say, and they shouldn't, because it literally makes no sense for an assassin to support slavery of any kind.
Right. But there are Templars on the Union side.
And I think that makes sense. I do. I think that makes sense because Templars are not dedicated necessarily to one particular ideology. I think their ideology itself is a chameleon. Like, they will adapt to whatever ideology as long as they can stay in power.
Exactly. It's about control. And I think the idea of freedom versus control is a big thing when it comes to assassins versus Templars. And so he's not in any of the games, but he does briefly appear in the Lost Descendants book, which takes place in the Civil War. He works to stop the Templars. He seems to be working with the assassins, so he is like an assassin friend. And John Wilkes Booth is a confirmed Templar. And so he's assassinated by a Templar, which I find too much of a coincidence that he would not, if he is killed by John Wilkes Booth as a Templar, the Templars ordered his death. So I'm going to lay out my kind of thing and you can say what you want. So in universe, as we know, we have an answer. He is an assassin friend. Abraham Lincoln. I believe there's a lot of his ideology that would lean Templar. I think especially with his belief of this determinist God and the idea that, like, the human mind is controlled by a higher power. Does that not sound like an apple of Eden?
I mean, it really does.
Right. And this whole idea of, like, especially at the end of the war, of him kind of expressing this idea that I'm not in control of anything. Everything that's happening here is the will of God. These ideas, I think, that lean him to be, I think he could be a Templar. And especially since he's so much about bringing the institution, maintaining the institution of the Union, is very Templar in that. Now, I will yield that he could be like Washington in that he is a friend of the assassins, but the assassins do not fully trust him to maintain the freedom of the people and would assassinate him in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I can definitely see what you're saying. So, okay, here's my thought. I think that when we talk about Lincoln, we focus on the Civil War, as we should, or we focus on his assassination, as we should. However, I think there are other things that Lincoln does in his presidency that also deserve to be discussed. And I do agree with you. I think that, in my opinion, his actions, his beliefs about institutions lend more Templar. And the one I'm going to bring up is about the Dakota War of 1862.
I did not even touch his Native American treatment.
I know. And I mean, every president in the 1800s is terrible to Native Americans, to indigenous peoples of this country. And I would argue most presidents are, in general, just by nature of being a president on this land. Like, it's just kind of the nature of the beast. But presidents in the 1800s are much worse because there are wars going on and removal. But okay, so the Dakota War of 1862 has a lot of different names, but is basically an armed conflict between the United States and several bands of Dakota. It starts in 1862 when the Dakota were facing starvation, displacement, etc. in like lower Minnesota, and they attacked some settlers. The settlements and the United States Army attacked back. And the war lasts for 5 weeks and results in the deaths of hundreds of settlers and the displacement of thousands more, in addition to countless members of the Dakota tribes. In the aftermath, Dakota people were exiled and basically forcibly removed and sent to the Dakotas, now known as the Dakotas, and Nebraska. The state of Minnesota confiscated all of their land and sold it. But the thing I want to bring up is that the war ended with the largest mass execution in United States history to this day, with the hanging of 38 Dakota men that was authorized by Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a huge stain on his legacy for somebody who is credited with freeing the slaves, also oversaw the biggest mass execution in our history.
Right. And it's worth saying for a thing of like why this is Templar. A lot of times we like to picture the assassins as mainly like what you would consider European Americans, but in lore and actuality, that's not the case. Most of in the Americas, the South and North Americas and Central America, the majority of assassin members were freed slaves, Native Americans, and other people of Native descent in South America and the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Those are the people who mainly joined the assassins. So it's very likely, like, in universe, this massacre could have been a massacre of assassins.
That's fair, too. And I also think it should be said that, to be fair, I think it's something like 302 Dakota were captured and presented for execution to Lincoln. And Lincoln reviews all of them, and he only sentences like 38 or 39 to be hanged, which is still, again, horrible, but it's not 303. So it could have been worse, for sure, but this is still horrific, in my opinion. And so I feel like it definitely makes kind of the glorification of Abraham Lincoln more complicated, right? More complex. And I think any time we look at a political figure with this much power, it's going to be a more complex story. When we have more everyday people like Harriet Tubman who do extraordinary things, it's a little bit more simpler to say, yeah, this is a good person or a bad person. Mm-hmm. It's more complicated when you have people with a lot of power. And that's just kind of the way it is. But I do feel like Lincoln, in a lot of his beliefs, leans more toward the Templars. Because, and my primary opinion on that is because he glorifies the institution of the United States, because he is an institutionalist who is concerned with preserving the institution above all other things. Above all else, he's concerned with the institution of the U.S., not with the people. And that doesn't mean he doesn't care about the people. He probably did. He for sure did. But that's not the primary concern. And I feel like that's a very Templar move. But at the same time, I can also see him, because we know he wasn't technically affiliated with either group.
Mm-hmm.
I can see him moving away from the Templars and moving toward the assassins over the length of his presidency.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it's possible that the Templars wanted to prolong a war that they were losing, and that just to try to maintain their institutional power or whatnot, whatever plan they have. And then Lincoln works against that and does that. And then they move away and they're like, and then he starts creating a Reconstruction plan that values more individual freedom. And they're like, no, we have to kill him. Yeah. But yeah, that's Abraham Lincoln. I think this might be a little, I don't know. I think people, when you go into it and you hear Abraham Lincoln, you're like, oh, he's going to be an assassin. But really, when you look into what he said and what he did in a lot of ways, you're like, well,
I don't know. I just have this hot take that I don't think any president can be an assassin.
Washington comes close.
But I also feel like Washington is like the pseudo president. Like he is the first president. He is a real president, but he doesn't feel like a real president because he's setting up everything. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I don't know, especially like basically from like 1800 on, it's just hard for me to believe that any president would be affiliated with the assassins.
Well, and it's hard because the assassins are not meant to be
in power.
Exactly. There's supposed to be a check on those in power.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I think we're ready to wrap up.
All right. Well, thank you so much for bringing this research as always. I think this is a really interesting episode, a really complicated episode, and a really complicated person who is maybe not what we think of him, who's been perhaps glorified in America. So thank you again, as always, Austin, for doing the research. And thank you so much for listening to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. You can find us on Twitter at AC Lorecast.
If you have any lore questions or topics to unpack, join our Cups Podcasting and More Discord server. It's the best place on the internet. You can also support us financially through our Patreon. Find us on patreon.com/Assassin's Creed Lorecast. The Assassin's Creed Lorecast is part of the Robots Radio Network. For more information about the Robots Radio Network, join the Discord server via the link in our episode's description.
If you enjoyed the show or learned something new today, please subscribe, leave us a review, and join the Patreon. And if you enjoyed our intro and outro music, make sure you give a big thank you to Pipeman Studios. Thank you, Pipeman. Thanks again for listening to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. And always remember, Assassins, stay in the shadows to serve the light.
This episode is brought to you by FX's Alien Earth, the official podcast. Each week, host Adam Rogers is joined by guests, including the show's creator, cast, and crew, in this exclusive companion podcast. They will explore story elements, deep dive into character motivations, and offer an episode-by-episode behind-the-scenes breakdown of each terrifying chapter in this new series. Search FX's Alien Earth wherever you listen to podcasts.
Want to live better? We've got a lot of work to do. Join Chris Hemsworth in National Geographic's new Disney Plus original series, Limitless. Live Better Now.
I'm diving headfirst into cutting-edge science to uncover 3 powerful secrets to living better right now. The growth that occurs through any challenging experience is really what we seek.
Chris Hemsworth stars in Limitless. Live Better Now. Now streaming on Disney Plus and Hulu.
It's showtime.